ABAS Productions, Scene 6, Take 1. Our trees are holding hands. Welcome to ABAS Seasonal Bonsai Series. This is July, middle of July, and we are going to take a look at our Trident maples and see what they've done in the last month. And then we're going to spend quite a bit of time working on our Shimpaku junipers. This is the major time to work on junipers. So let's get started. Carmen will review the Tridents, and then I'll get into the Shimpakus. This is our very youngest one that has grown, still growing. We love this. We want to keep this going. I lost a branch right here from the wire. It got bumped. No big deal because I've got one there and one there. So this, other than always weeding. Okay. The next one is our Dennis Makishima Trident I shouldn't have bought. All of our root grafts are growing fine. We discussed the problem up here that this didn't sprout out. I'm just going to keep these cut back, pinch these back, which I've been doing. You can see we've had the heat's been brutal. It's probably going to get worse. But all we care about right now is this part and then these two sacrifice branches, and we're going to keep letting them go. That's that. This is Challenger, always challenging. So these are growing nicely. See that? We had 3 thread grafts. All 3 of them died, and I'm not sure if it was because the growth up here was so aggressive, because we've been pinching these back, and they need to be pinched again. These get pinched. This is an ongoing pinch. So these get pinched. But since these are dead, and here we go, see, you can just take them off. These were what fed those, and it didn't make it. So we're going to just go ahead and cut those off and let those go back up again because they'll keep growing. We can use them again, maybe try again. This one also died. I think I did do this, but it was too late, where you pull it up so at least it can compete with the other rapidly growing branches. Other than that, this is doing fine. So pinch and keep going. Okay, for our tree that's further along in development, as you can see, we defoliated it. It grew out again. The leaves have reduced in size quite a bit, so you can see the effect of defoliation. It's starting to grow out a bit on the top, so I'm going to cut back these extensions on the top. I'm on this lower branch. We're still developing the ramification on the lower part on this branch. So these have been wired, but the wire was starting to cut in, so I did take the wire off a few weeks ago, and we're just going to continue to let these grow and thicken a bit before we cut them back. So I'm just going to go ahead and trim these back to the first set of leaves, or to the profile. Hopefully the first set of leaves is within the profile of the tree. So on this one, if you can see here, it's grown out from here. This is the first set of leaves, so I'm going to cut it back to there, and that's kind of within the profile of the tree. This one, oh gosh, it's a little bit under the profile, but this is so far out that you can see the inner node on this extension is way long. You go from here to here. That's way too long to be used in the design of the tree. So I'm just going to cut it off. Cut it to there. Moving around to this side, this one, this extension, we have a set of leaves there. That's perfect within the profile of the tree. Moving around, this one, Once again, we can cut off to here because that's within the profile of the tree. Moving around to this one, we have a huge extension here. I don't really like this. Is way too far out. I don't really like that. It's extended too far. There's plenty of growth around here, so I'm just going to cut it back and see what happens. Moving around to this one, we have let's see. We have a node right here and a leaf. So I'm going to cut to there within the profile of the tree. Moving around to here, I can cut to this one. Put the leaves there. Cut to that one. It's within the profile of the tree. And so that's basically about all we're going to do now. Well, let's see. Maybe on these guys, if I want these to thicken at all, I will let them grow. So I'm just going to look at these and ask myself, do I need this to get thicker? If I need this to get thicker, then I will let it grow. Although I don't like this one because it's coming right out of the bottom of the branch. And there's another one right above it. I don't know if you can see that. There's this little smaller one here with shorter internodes right above it. I'm just going to take this whole thing off. Let's see. Get in there without, cut the right one off. Don't cut the one you want off. Okay, so we're continuing to evaluate this lower branch to see if we need to thicken any of these extensions or the branch behind it. And I'm looking back behind this extension, and I don't think I need to thicken anything back there. So I'm just going to prune this one back and hopefully get the ramification going. There's another little node right back behind there. I'm going to cut it all the way back to there. Have an extension here. I don't think I need to thicken anything in here. It looks pretty good. Just going to prune that back to keep it within the profile of the tree. And then coming down to this one, don't really need to thicken anything there, so I'm just going to cut this back, keep it within the profile of the tree. And let's see, one more little guy right in here. So do we need to keep this? Let's see where it's coming from. Yeah, we do. So I'm just going to clip this back because that does not need to thicken at all. Maybe a little bit more. Keeping it within the profile. Keeping it within the profile. So just continue to let it grow. It was fertilized not long ago, probably about 2 weeks ago. Added another layer of BioGold fertilizer and just put it back on the bench and let it grow. Okay, so here we are, July. Major work on our junipers. This are subjects, our 4 subjects that we're going to be working on. They've all just been growing since January. We haven't done anything other than fertilize, spray for insects, spray for fungus, and fertilize and let grow. So that's what's been happening to all of these. So I will take each one and discuss what we're going to do this month. And we'll start with our small early development tree. This we repotted, fertilized, it's just growing. I wired this lower branch, it died, but it really doesn't matter because when I look at this tree, I'm looking at a tree that I would probably like to have to be about 14 to 16 inches tall. So anything that's down here in this lower section is not really even going to play into the final design of the tree. So I'm not even worried about these guys. Letting them grow will help thicken the trunk. What we're going to do to this tree is just maybe thin out some of the weaker foliage and just let it grow. So that's all we're going to do to that guy. Next, this is the one that's going to take some time. This is our pre-bonsai. We've just been letting it grow. this is the time to work on doing Shari. We can create Shari on the trunk. That's one of the things we're going to do. We've marked some sections here that we're going to take the bark off. This part of the trunk here, there was a big branch that was cut off. So this root that's underneath here is dead anyway. So we're going to just use this to create some deadwood interest. In the trunk here, also on the back, there were some big branches that were cut off. You can see here, this branch was cut off. This branch, there's some big branches that were cut off. So we're going to utilize these areas that have already died back where the branch was cut off to create Shari and interest on the trunk on both of those areas. So that's one thing we're going to do. Next thing we're going to do, we kind of went through this tree and did a pre-evaluation and did some marking of branches and stuff with some consultation from other people to get ideas on the best design for the tree. So we're going to go through, clean out what we don't need. We have some branches that are marked for gin. We have branches marked to take off, and we have branches marked that we're going to create pads from. But we'll get into that when we actually start thinning out the foliage so you can see better what the structure of the tree is, what we're going to save to use to develop the tree from, because there's a lot of this that's going to go. But it's growing strongly, it's growing nicely. Even though we did a very aggressive repot on this tree, it's growing strong, it's growing very nicely. You can see all these extensions. That tells you you can work on this tree. You can do what you need to do with this tree. Okay, this tree is Carmen's tree, and I'm going to let Carmen explain what we're doing with this one.
This is my Shimpaku that I've had since 1987, and it's gone through hell, but it's gone through hell, it's coming back. And part of that is because of a good fertilizer regime, and I have not put it in full redding sun. I found out after years and years, they're supposed to be somewhat shaded, and this poor thing was suffering unbelievably. So now more shade in the afternoons especially. We fertilized it. It's never looked this good. And you see all of these beautiful tips coming out. So you can see where you can see more air, because we've worked on this before where this is really dense, the other one dense. This has already been worked on. So now we need to look at what has grown, kind of redevelop a little bit more. I've made some marks for where I think I want pads. Very subjective. Once you start cutting, you have to keep looking at it over and over and over again to decide if that's what you really want. The other thing about this tree, well, we'll discuss it later. We'll cover it up close later.
This is our tree that is in the later stages of development. As you can see, all the primary branches and secondary branches are pretty well developed. Nice thick branches for the primary branch going up the tree. The branching structure is set. So that's really good. The pads are starting to develop nicely. As you can see on this lower pad, this used to just be one big mass of foliage. We're now dividing it into a series of pads. We'll have a pad here, we have a pad here, we have a pad here, and a pad here. So developing pads like this, actually, it adds complexity, it adds age. That's what makes a tree look older. So as you develop the tree, you'll start with, like one major pad, one main pad. But then as that pad develops, you break it into smaller pads, and that adds complexity to the design and makes it look older. So on this tree, for the work that we're going to do right now, we're just going to go through and prune some of this back. In fact, as I was looking at this, it really hasn't grown real aggressively just yet. So I might even wait a little while, maybe until next month, to see if it grows a little bit stronger before I actually start pruning it back. Because basically all I'm going to do is go in and prune the pads to, keep them, to develop density in the pads. So I'm going to just cut off the growing tips so that that keeps the growth more compact and makes it divide so it gets a little bit denser, because the pads are still a little bit thin. They can stand to get a little bit denser. So, and since it isn't really showing that really strong growth just yet. I might let it grow just a little bit longer so it gets a little stronger. And next month, we'll work on this one.
Go for it.
Okay, the little guy here, we're just going to remove the wire from the trunk because it's starting to cut in now. We've set a little bit of movement into it. Not much else we can do. We'll take off this dead branch and we're going to thin out some of the weak foliage inside, because in order to get something to grow strong, you want to encourage this, this aggressive tip growth here. You want to push the growth from the tips. We want to push the growth from the tips. And to do that, to enhance that, we are going to clean out a lot of the weak stuff on the inside. So a lot of this weak foliage that's back underneath, we're going to take it out and send all the energy to the tips, because that's where we want it to grow. The tips of the foliage here, you can see how they are more compact and more dense. And then you get back into the inside and you have growth like this that's very weak. It's elongated. It doesn't have, the tips are not pushing like this. You can see the new growth coming out on these as opposed to that. So that's how you know this is the strong part. It's out of the tip. Back inside, it's just going to shed this foliage eventually anyway. And if you leave it on there, the tree is trying to support all of the this weak stuff back inside. It's still sending resources, the resources of the tree back into this weaker foliage. And if you take it off, then you are eliminating the tree wasting its energy on stuff that is going to eventually drop anyway. So we take off all of the weak stuff back inside.
It's basically the bottom ones.
Yeah, the bottom stuff, the old foliage that's back inside, like from last year before, the weak stuff back in there. This is all the new growth from this year. This is the strong stuff. So just taking out that weak stuff will force the tree to elongate. It'll put all of its resources into the tips and grow stronger and get bigger. And that's kind of that's our goal for this tree, is just to let it grow, get stronger, get bigger. So all of this weak stuff underneath, getting rid of it all. You use that same technique on a more refined tree, but not, you do it with a little more finesse. You don't just start ripping out the old stuff. I did that once and Peter said, you should have left some of that in there. Because sometimes if you cut back, if you cut back the tips, the strong growing tips, then sometimes this weak stuff in the back will actually start to grow. So you can actually utilize that to develop more density in your pads. That's what you do on a more refined tree. On this tree, we're focusing on growth in the growing tips to get it strong. On a refined tree, you're focused on sending that energy back into the pads so that they get more dense. I would just take all of this stuff off and just leave the tip. It's amazing how much you can take off if you leave the growing tip, how much you can actually take off of a tree, of a shimpaku, juniper. It's amazing. And I'm going to take this, that's a little weak guy there, little weak guy there. Like I said, these branches down here are not going to enter into the final design of the tree. They're just going to help thicken the trunk and maybe create gin or shari later. Yep, all these guys, all of this stuff goes.
What about this that's right off of the...
You can just leave that. It doesn't matter. If this were on a tree where we were trying to encourage back budding, actually, that's another point to make from this. If you have a tree that's leggy and you want to encourage back budding, like you see back in here, back on the trunk, if you have something that's really leggy and you want to push growth back in closer to the trunk like this. You also do this. You want to let it grow and grow strong. When it's growing strong, that's when it will form back buds. If you prune it back and keep it weak, it won't form back buds. So if you're trying to get that back budding, we want to encourage elongation and strengthening in the branches. It depends, when you're like designing the tree and you're working on the refinement of the tree. You have to look at where you're working. You have to ask yourself, do I want this branch to grow and get heavier, get stronger? Or do I want to start developing the finer ramification? If you want stronger growth and a more robust growth to thicken, like if I wanted to thicken this branch, I would, let it grow. But these, I'm not even worried about these. These are not even going to play into the design of the tree. So I'm not being real careful with how I'm pruning this at all. I just want it to grow strong. That's it. Once you start working on the branch development and pad development, then you have to be a little more concerned about what you're leaving and what you're taking off. And that's what we'll be dealing with on our pre-bonsai. So maybe it will become more clear when we start doing work on our pre-bonsai. All right, we are going to start our primary work on this, our pre-bonsai. The first step is going to be thinning out everything that we don't need. Right now, we need to set the primary structure for the tree. That's the basic goal for today's work, is setting the primary structure. So we have things marked to remove, things marked for pads, and things marked for gins. So the first step is going to be cleaning out what we don't need so we can see what's left. Okay, so one of the problems with this tree, once we evaluated it, there are a lot of because there's so much dense foliage on it, the tree has tried to support a lot of dense foliage, so none of the branches have really developed into very strong branches. Most of them are pretty kind of wimpy and weak. They've elongated, so we're going to have to choose things for the branches that we want to keep that are a little bit closer in, that have the foliage closer in, maybe a little bit stronger. But if you look inside, there's just not any really strong, heavy branches in here to use for our primary structure. The biggest branch on the tree is this lower branch because they cut off, you can see where we discussed making the Shari, some of the big branches were cut off, and maybe there was a good reason for that since I can't really see them. But this is the biggest branch on the tree, is this primary branch here. And it's kind of going off in a little bit of an odd direction. So when we evaluated this for how we wanted to style the tree, the decision was made to try to make this into like a little separate tree, a separate tree, or give it a separate, its own apex. So it looks like kind of a little separate tree over here. So that this part of the tree is then going to be kind of developed into its own separate entity. And then moving up the tree, there's most of the branches are just very small and wimpy, and leggy to boot, small, wimpy, leggy. So they're not really very good for starting to develop pads from, because in order to start pads, you need foliage close. You need divisions close up to the trunk. And if you see like this one, we've marked for removal because it's leggy. It's all the way out here. There's no ramification back closer to the trunk. So this is going to go because it's too leggy to use. So we've chosen, some of the things we've chosen are stronger branches that have growth closer into the trunk. We may even have to let some of these grow and actually encourage back budding back in close to the trunk to get better ramification. But we'll find that out as we clean out. We'll be able to evaluate things a little bit better. So we'll start with cleaning out stuff that we don't need. I'm going to go ahead and cut this one off first because it's in the way of this. So this just totally goes. This isn't even going to be a gin. So we're going to take that completely off. So now we'll work on this part of it. Let's see. Were we going to use any of this? Well, this is going to be a back branch. Okay, so let's go back to this one. I'm going to take a little bit off of this one as well. I'm just cutting this back a little bit to get it out of the way of the area where we're going to be working so we can see it a little bit better. So we have chosen this to be, we're going to actually move this up to be the kind of the apex of this tree, either that or maybe this, and use that for a branch. Anyway, we're going to develop one of these two. We're going to use to develop kind of an apex for this area of the tree. This comes off. See, this is a smaller one. It has division back in closer, so we're going to use this to develop a pad from because we have division back here close to the trunk. So that's a good one. This one, you can see how leggy that is. There's no growth back in here. Division doesn't start until we get out here. So that's really not a good branch to use for development. So we're going to make a gin out of this one. So Carmen's ginning. We're going to make a little gin out of that guy. Moving right along. Let's see, what do we got here? This is another one that we're going to gin. Want to gin that one, Carmen?
Yeah, go ahead.
Cut it off. Do we want to keep any of the divisions on that for the gin? Probably not. They're not that. I
think this is so young.
It's so young. Yeah, they're so young. Okay.
So what are we left with?
So we're left with this and this. This will be our apex. We're going to wire this up for the apex. Wire this out for a pad. So we have pad, we have apex. So, oh, that one I got to cut that off. Excuse me. Take this off. So this is, we've removed what we don't need here. We're going to have to go in, wire, then set the basic structure, and then let it grow. So now moving up the tree. This is remove. This is our back pad. We're going to take this one off. I'm going to take this off, and this is going to be our back branch.
Oh, comes off.
That comes off. I'm just going to leave this here for the moment, just because I'm not sure if I want to keep that or not. This one we're going to remove.
So what's going to be the pad in this area?
Right here. This is going to be the pad. This is going to be our pad right here. We're going to probably try and utilize maybe several small branches initially to create a pad here, and take off this heavy piece that's growing up because it's a weird angle. It's too thick to wire and move. So that's coming off. Okay, moving around, we have this guy is coming off. We're saving this for the pad. Where's the surgeon here?
The
surgeon.
So as you can see, we're taking this off because we're keeping
that part.
use the paint. Okay.
And then these little guys back in here as well are going to come off.
These are so weak.
They're so weak, yeah. They're really not. This might play into. We're going to try and build a pad out of this. We're going to utilize several smaller branches in this area initially to create a back pad here. This will eventually be refined. We'll probably thin it out and just keep some of the basic ones, some of the better ones. But for now, we're going to utilize this to create a pad in the back.
Okay.
Then we're coming around to this side. We're going to take this out.
Thin.
And we have a pad here.
Hold on. Where?
Right here. This guy is a pad. This guy's a pad.
This whole thing.
Maybe we'll save a couple. Maybe we'll save a couple of those. Yeah, we'll save maybe a couple of those and utilize those for the pad. And then we were going to, I think this was going to kind of be the apex in here. And we were going to gin the top. Sometimes you make gins just because you might want them in the future and then you might not. But if you take it off, you can't put it back. So we just leave it on there and evaluate it as we develop the tree. And if it looks like it's going to work out and help with the design of the tree, we keep it. If we don't, we just take it off. But we'll leave it for now. This is going to be the apex of the tree. We kind of want it in the apex in this area. This was going off too far to the left. It's going off too far to the left in that direction. So we want to kind of bring it back using this to kind of bring it back into this area rather than going off in that area.
So could you trace where
the line of the tree? So the basic line of this tree, when you're designing a tree, one of the important things to look for is the line of the tree and how that brings the viewer's eye through the design of the tree. And on this tree, we elected to have the line of the tree come up. It was going off in this direction, to my eye, too far. Other people may like it like that. There's nothing wrong with that kind of a design, but it depends on the person that's styling the tree. So to my eye, I would rather have the apex coming back a little bit in this direction because we're going to develop this part of the tree kind of as a secondary trunk. And for the tree to flow together, you want the apex coming back, these two trees kind of coming together, more than having one going in one direction and one going in the other direction, because that just, the viewer's eye is just pulled in too many directions and it does not look good. At least, that's the way I see it. Other people may disagree with me and, do their own thing with the development, but hey, that's what it's all about. It's art. You get to do what you want to do. So anyway, that's basic structure. We're going to now go through and thin and wire these, but for the sake of time, I'm going to do this. It's going to take quite a long time to actually do the wiring and pruning on this. So we're going to stop right here. I'm going to, at my own leisure, wire and thin it out, and then we'll come back and revisit it once that work is done. Dodie reminded me that we need to create our Shari here. So let's go ahead and get my knife. It's going to be a little bit difficult because this is all dead. When it's dead like this, it's hard to get the bark off, but let's see what we can do. So once the once the bark dries and adheres to the wood underneath, it's really difficult to clean that off. It's best, like for the gin up here, when it was fresh and living tissue, it comes off a lot easier. Once it's dead like this, it's very difficult to get that old bark off. So you kind of need some special tools. This is just kind of a scraping tool, and it is specifically designed for this kind of work. So we're going to just get as much of this off as we can. I'm going to score this around the edge just to make sure that I'm not going to be stripping bark into the area that I want to keep. Well, up above here is the living tissue is above. I'm just basically creating a shari around where this dead area is. Since it's already dead, we might as well utilize it. Junipers, the thing about junipers is people like to see deadwood shari on junipers. So that's one of the reasons why whenever you're pruning or working on a juniper, don't just cut off a branch and think you just got to get rid of it. Think about maybe you need to use it for a shari, or maybe use it for gin. Because junipers, deadwood, it's all about deadwood when it comes to junipers. That's what people like to see. So I need to get I guess that's it. Tools, surgeon's tools. See how easy that comes off when it's fresh, when it's living tissue? Comes off very easily, but down here where it's dead, it's the bark is adhered to the wood underneath. I'm good. Boy. See, I'm getting down to the hardwood underneath. We could take a Dremel tool and because this was cut flat, it looks pretty man-made, pretty not very interesting. So we can take a Dremel tool or a carving tool and add some detail to this to make it look a little more natural, which we will do, and then show you at some point in the future, probably next month sometime, what that looks like. See, this is all dead in here. I'm going to take something and clean that out so we can make it look a little bit nicer. But this is all going to be the deadwood feature right here in the front of the tree. All this over here, down through here. This is living tissue here, feeding the tree. So Anyway, it will clean this up a little bit better, so it looks a little more artistic. But that's what we're going to do to the other two places on the back. We're going to do the same procedure to these two and create a little more Shari in the back. Going to wire and thin and set the pads, and we'll revisit it once that work is done. Okay, so now we've finished with the Shari and thinning out and wiring. We have to give credit to our club member, Bob Ricker, who did all the Shari work for us and actually helped us wire this tree. His help was greatly appreciated because we were able to accomplish this in one day rather than several. So we have created Shari here, over here, and these will improve as we'll work on them as we develop the tree. We'll continue work on these Shari features. And we went through, you can see the difference in the density of this tree. We've thinned it out greatly, selected our branches that we wanted to use for our pads, or beginning our pad development. And now that it's open and we're able to look into the tree, we can study it and see that we have several options for how we might want to develop this tree in the future. Number one option would be we could actually take off this whole branch on this side and just use this little section to develop the nice little tree from on this side. Next option would be moving up to here. We could actually gin the whole top and go back and use the branches on this side. We can pull these up and bring them up and make this the apex of the tree. The next option would be to go up and utilize this branch for the apex. We decided we had this as one of the options, but decided that it was not a good one. So we cleaned this up, and we're going to gin this whole top and bring this up for the apex. So we're going to gin this. Oops, I need my other. Excuse me.
That looks a lot better with that black on.
Listen to this
Hmm?
That would work.
Yeah, I think it's about the same thing here.
Yeah. Describe what you're doing.
So we're scoring the bark here at the base of the gin. So when we start ripping bark off, we don't damage the bark that we want to keep below it. We don't want to rip into that and take a chance of losing some of the live tissue that we want to keep. So we're going around that. I think that's good. Take that. Alrighty, so there we have our gin on the top of the tree. We're going to move this branch up. Put a little bit of movement into it. And just let it grow to become the apex. We're just going to let this grow. We want this to thicken to continue the line of the trunk. We want this to thicken, so we're just going to let it run. I'm not going to prune anything off of this. Just let it stay healthy and grow. The rest of the branches are kind of, If you will notice, most of the branches on this are pretty leggy, like these are all very leggy. What we need to happen is to get budding back so we can replace these branches. But for now, we just leave them like this. We wire them out, let them grow. Budding back occurs when the tree is very healthy and when it's growing very strong. So we're leaving all of the tips out here to grow. Laid out these pads. So keeping a little bit on this. I don't know if we want to do anything to make it look a little bit more interesting. So we can look, this is going to be on the bench for a while. We want to make it look interesting so when we look at it, it makes us feel good instead of making us feel like that we want to do something. That needs to go up. I'm just putting some bends in this so I can kind of shorten it so it can act as the top of this pad. Just shortening it a bit. Sometimes if you have something that's really long and leggy, you have to leave it there for a while, but you can actually make it look a little bit better by putting some twists in it to pull it in closer to the trunk. But that's going to go in the future. That's not a permanent feature of the design. This is just kind of its own little entity here. So moving around this way, we'll kind of utilize these to fill in a bit, make that a little more interesting. Just kind of placing the branches. So most of the future of this tree is going to be based on the back budding that we can get to replace these long-legged branches. So not putting a lot of energy into using these for developing pads because it's all going to be pushed back. This is just to get the tree situated so that it's going to grow nice and strong and eventually backbud for us. When you're creating pads, you want to clean out all of the stuff that's growing down because that's just going to weaken the tree, and it looks much better when you go through and clean up the bottoms of the pads so they look nice and clean on the bottoms. So these are already pretty good on this side. Pretty good on this side. I think we need to add a little more wire to this, but we'll do that. We'll do that later. Still need a few little pieces of fine wire on these branches up here, but we'll do that later. So you can kind of see now basic structure of the tree. In the future, we may decide to come back and utilize this for the apex of the tree. We may decide to come back here and utilize just this side for the tree. But for now, we're going, we've set the basic structure. We're going to let it grow, see if we can get back budding. And that's all we're going to be doing for today. So that's it. Now Carmen will share her.
This is our third tree, my old tree that's been through adversity and trauma and is trying to come out the other end. We're going to try and help it. I wanted to talk real quick about the gin thing, that he's making the gin. There was no gin on this. This thing was the size of my filthy, dirty little finger. And I've done this, and it looks pretty artificial. I originally did this oval cut because I was told to do an oval cut. It's flat, it's oval, and I did another one here, really ugly. And I kept looking at this is hideous, but eventually, thank goodness, I put another one here. I did a little bit where I'm going to deepen these and carve these a little deeper so it's not quite so flat because it looks so artificial. And the trick is to get it to look like this. And for a human being to do that just on their own with carving tools is literally impossible. It's time, it's weather, and you get it started by kind of working with the veins that you already, the little lines and cracks that you already have. But the good thing is, see this pumping up, which is what Renee's is going to do, or the pre-bonsai is going to do over time. So it's going to be really obvious what's alive and what's dead. And you can track it all the way down, even down to there, down to the ground. So that part's good. Could be better. We're going to work on it. I'm not doing anything with the gin. All right, so this one I've marked where I think the pads are because I already worked on this and we did start some pad building, but now it's all grown out again. So we're going to go farther with this. So I already have this one. I have this one. I have this one. And this is kind of grown out a lot. This could be a secondary pad. So this is why I'm growing. If I do all this together, we've got this huge wide thing. I don't want a huge wide thing. I want it to be pretty compact. So this can be a second one. And this is a pad. Underneath it, this could be another pad, or this could be cut off. You see how long and lengthy that is? So I'll tell you what, I don't like it. Once you start going out that long distances, it just looks ugly and you get behind yourself. You need to get this worked back. So the other thing you see in here is juvenile foliage. See these little needle guys? And sometimes if you've stressed it, it's over fertilized, it will revert to this juvenile foliage. If it's all over the tree, you have a problem and it has to grow out. It's just these little, and you can just, heck, pull them off. And see this one behind it? That one's adult. And it may revert to, there may be some more juvenile foliage just over time. And some species are worse than others. Shimpakos are usually pretty good, but of course mine is, it wants to tell me what it thinks, and it thinks that I'm pushing it too hard. So all of these little juvenile things you just take out as you come across them. Don't want them. Okay. Juvenile. And you'll see juvenile, I'll show you another one later, juvenile, and then at the end, it's now suddenly mature, scale. All right, this one I think I'm keeping this. It's pretty big, but look where it bifurcates way back there. And we've got all this little stuff back here. So this, don't know where I'm gonna put it. And also then again, sometimes gin get in the way. This is gonna be a foliage pad. I doubt if anybody's ever gonna see this. It's basically on the back of the tree. So this is probably gonna come off. But that's where I'm at. Okay, this, and I've done two of these. There's these little tiny branches. And normally you would cut these off, but I said, what the heck? It's forming something along there. And I kind of like it as a back, and I'm going to leave it for now. What's the harm? Eventually I'll probably cut it off, but for now I'm leaving that. So we go around. All right, here's another spot. I have this branch, this branch, this branch, this branch. Well, what's going to happen with this? I can wire it out. It's going to stick out farther than everything else. It may bud back, but good. No, it's not worth it. Okay. So then I have, this is a nice pad. 1, 2, 3. These two can form pads. That one and that one. And I'm going to then cut these back. I'm going to cut this now because why not? It's really leggy. So I'm going to use these and these for now. And eventually this will probably be its own pad someday. But for now, not. All right. And then this guy up here, this is great because I want that up there. See more. Here we go. Juvenile. So this is what you want. This is wonderful because then you can work with this. It can go over the top of these. That's the second layer to make your pad have the shape that you want. That could be a pad, but for right now, these three are, this is a pad right here. Not sure if that's going to be included, or I could do these together or just put this out by itself because that could eventually be a pad, but definitely those three. Okay. Back on the front, this is another one. I've let this grow, and there's something about this. When it first started, it was about this size, a little bit bigger, and I just kind of like the placement of where it was sitting right there. And as long as it didn't get, weak and die out, I thought I want to keep this for a while. So now I've got this and this. So I'm going to just thin this back, lay this over the top, because it's like a little extra accent, a little piece that makes sense it being there, and it adds something to it instead of this trunk is pretty boring as far as it doesn't curve much. It just kind of flows up here and then goes up. I'm going to keep that. And then we go up to this. This is super strong. If I could replace this, I would, but I've already ginned this, so I'm going to be using this. There's a pad. There's a pad. There's a pad. So it's nice in the front, especially have these nice boom, boom, boom. It's going to add a lot of, it's going to draw your eye, and it's going to look more polished. And then I'm not going to go through all of these, but we're just continuing on up. Because as I get up here, the apexes are the hardest. So as you're building stuff, you go, do I not need all this stuff? How short do I need it? That decision is going to be made when I get there and not right now. So the ones that I've done, I need to thin out everything underneath and take it back. Could you start on that one? So if I go, what would you cut? I cut anything hanging in for the inside, all this little crappy stuff, and there's some more needle foliage. And then I can pull off the stuff that's coming out underneath.
You might want to leave a few of the things that are coming up off the top.
That I want to keep a lot of the stuff, coming off the top. It's mostly
off the bottom.
Off the bottom.
Yeah.
Because you automatically do this. And whether you cut off anything or not, by taking off all the lower growing stuff is not going to be healthy. It's not helping the tree out. And at the same time, I'm pulling it back a little bit. So basically everything. This is all going to go back. It's not critical. You see how that's flatter now?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want it to look like. And when this going over the top, and that will fill out over that. Probably a little bit more out here. I can cut some of this outer, pull some of this outer stuff out. Would this be called pinching rather than cutting? You're not supposed to pinch.
No, this is thinning.
This is thinning.
This is thinning.
It is not pinching.
Pinching, thinning.
Okay. A little bit more over there. So I'm going to continue thinning all of this out. And we'll come back after it's wired for the placement. I'm going to try not to move the branches too much, so when I place, you'll be able to tell how I'm actually forming a pad. Okay. All right, this is my tree, which has already gone through one session of building pads. So this would be the second. So we built pads, it grew out, I've cut it all back, I've rewired some spots, and now I haven't placed anything, maybe a little bit up there, so I'm not going to place it where I want the pads to show up. This is just bare wire. So starting with this one, obviously this isn't the way you want it. So we flatten all these out. Actually, that one was wired across. So now we have, there we go. So that's separated from that, and then this is a 3 pad. And then I'm going to turn up the tips a little bit. Bring these two closer together. If I decide, so now this is kind of what I want, and then I can sit here and just pull off the stuff underneath. And then, oops, and then I wired this. See how bare this all is? This is really critical that we have this. Okay, so this is my top, so it's not quite so horribly flat. Hopefully it lives. And then go through here, pinch it back. Actually, everything that's going down comes off. It wants to grow up, and this is helping it have a lot of, the growth is all going up. So that helps. Even everything, even back here, all this little stuff that's going down, I'm going to pull off. Even these little guys like that. Okay, so that's our first little branch. And now what I like about this, I can't quite see it where I'm at. It crosses the trunk right here. I want this to cross the trunk a little bit, and maybe as this gets longer, maybe this will be a pad that goes a little bit over there because this trunk is boring somewhat. It's okay, but having a little bit of a cut across breaks your eye from just poof going up this trunk. All right, so the next one, stand up. I'm going to turn it so you can see from the top. I actually pulled these two together because they were kind of like frog legs going farther apart. So I did that. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, which is a little bit much, but I hadn't decided where I wanted to cut it. And on this side with a wad of wire, I have this one. I wanted to kind of make this one a higher pad above, so we have a pad here, here. This is a pad, and then if I move this back here, this can be a pad, like that. That's why I have those 4. I don't want 4 all at once. It gets really wide. It widens out and looks like this giant fan. Don't want that. But I can, for now, do it this way and decide what I want and don't want. And again, I'm just going to pull. Okay, I will pull more as we go. Let's go around. This one, I have one here, I have one here, I have one here. So let's move them away from each other a little bit. This is very thin and far out, but I've got these back here. So these are going to grow out and probably replace that. I have a little bit of juvenile foliage right there, you can see, but I'm just gonna leave it because that's pretty weak. So pull these back. This is kind of weak, but hopefully with all this I've got going behind it, I did wire this. I'll pull this over the top a little bit. This one, go a little bit over it. Maybe, nope, because I didn't wire it that way. There we go. And I'm doing it from up above, so I can't tell what's going on down below. So once I've wired this, I'm going to have to look at it from the front, then tweak it again. But I just want looking down on it, pad, pad, pad. And then this eventually is going to grow out to cover some of this also if I need it. Okay. I pulled this one out of the way. Let's see if we can see this. And so this is a little bit lower, so this is going to be a pad. It's somewhat separate from this. I want to see if that works. But I'm going to try that, and I'm going to wire it so it's flat, flat, flat. This has nothing behind it. I could put this one over the top of it. It's kind of artificial. So I'm not going to do it yet. I'm hoping I get something else, because you don't want a flat pad, you want it to curve. And right now this is pretty flat. That's going back towards, you don't want them, you want them coming out, you don't want them going back in towards the tree. Then I'm going to move this a little bit up out of the way so you can see. So I have, there's 3 right there. That's a pad. This one only has 2. Actually, a third one if it's counting there, but it's way far out. So I'm going to separate these 2 a little bit. So this might become a pad by itself, but I definitely have that as a pad by itself. Move it away a little bit. And all I can do is let this grow and see what happens. Okay, continuing it around back to the front. Eek. All right, so this one, I have this, and this, and that's a pad. So this is the one pad. Actually, that can be a whole separate pad right there. Pad. There's only 2, but it'll keep growing, so I'll be okay with that. And then this one, I think I was thinking of coming down below like that. This gin, it's really ugly and it's just kind of sticking straight out and in the way, but I didn't want to cut it out yet. I wanted to see what I could do with it. So that's why I'm kind of keeping that there. Okay, I think all of this could go down a little bit. Down, down, down. And then the tips go up. Oh, that's the one I was putting over the top. Okay, so we'll put that over the top and then take off some of that. Okay, not too bad. As it grows, you can keep doing this lower part whenever you see it. Come out and look at it and go, get rid of this stuff going down. So that's good. I can still see that gin, but it's really not that great, so that's fine. Okay. It's kind of obsessive where you go, I got to get rid of these things sticking down. It looks so much better when you take them off. Okay, so the top I had already pushed down a little bit. I need, like this spot, it's kind of bare, so I was going to swing this down into here. That's a pad, up a little bit more. So I have this right here. It has an over the top, but it's not, this hasn't grown out enough to look like an actual, the height. So I can get a little bit of height, like that. Okay. This is kind of a little bit long, but it's like I want something, again, to fill in down here also. So I'm going to let that grow out. That grows, okay. Back around to the back. I took that off. I didn't put any wire on this. I did put wire on this, so I'm going to move this down into there. I'm just going to pull these off. I didn't wire this. I'm going to cut that off. It's sticking up and it's really not doing anything. It's too small to really make a difference. This is my piece that's coming over the top of this. And this could also come over the top to start to have, so it's not quite so flat of a pad. Okay. Turning. All right, now we're up here. Did this one. Okay, I've got 1, 2, 3. There's my pad. 1, 2, 3. I have this one that goes over the top. Kind of, sort of. It doesn't want to hold its space. But basically, Not too flat to it. A little bit of a up. I think the way I wired it, it's not going to hold. Yep. Okay. I can live with it. And you leave these fairly straight. You need to leave room in between them. So this isn't one of those curve, 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 curve. Get it all tight and scrunch it in tight. This needs to grow so I can have more new stuff grow. So it needs to get the air. This is what we want, an open area. Not all jammed together, not all compressed. This goes over the top. This is another pad over the top of that one. Listen, see, I've got little buds coming out right there. That's going to come over the top of this. To give it depth. Thickness, I guess, thickness. And when you have it like this and you see all of this stuff in between, you can't have all of this. There's no air. There's no air. This is way too thick. So I'm just going to pull out the stuff underneath, and that should open this up. So that can be short. And now you can see a little bit more. And now we've got air. See, this is very thick right here. I could cut this back. Let me cut that back a little, like that. Okay, so this should be a little bit longer. This is a little bit shorter, so it makes kind of a circle, semicircle. Take that off too. Okay, I did that one. It's there. Let's go up here. This is pretty thick, but this is what I'm going to work with. So I've decided to push. Let me go back here. I have this gin also. You can see that straight on. And it's kind of hanging out there all by itself. And I don't have anything behind it. So for now, I'm putting this one down below it and decide what I want to do. If something grows out back here that I can fill that, I might fill that. But for now, you can still see the gin, but this is, to me, a little bit more interesting. So I'm gonna go that route. Okay. It's thick. This was too long. Okay. Let's see. Okay. And then right above this, so this is below, that would be a pad right there. And I want to pull this in so I can have layers in through here, which is fine. And then I'm going to pull this one in, and that's going to fill this whole area up. And that's a little bit long. You don't cut the wire too. So this is now filling in, and our apex is probably going to be this little guy right here. If you make it too long, if you make one of these other things, the apex, it's already long and kind of scrawny, and you need to build it from what's here. These little guys is what's going to build your apex, not something long. I could pull this thing up as an apex, but look how long that is, and you're that much higher. I need to build it up off of that. Okay, so that's just going in there so we can have something in the front. Okay. So if you look down, can you look down from the top, or shall I? Okay. Looking down from the top, you see we've got it all stretched out around here. Okay. So that looks pretty good. I've got a nice circle, and I can see, I think this needs to be thinned out a little bit more so you can see. Wait a minute, one more thing. What's this under here? That wasn't wired. It's going over that. If that goes on that side, this comes down here. Then we're good. A little bit shorter. Same thing, there's too much stuff, but once you take off everything underneath, you're almost guaranteed you're going to open it up somewhat. Okay. So I sit down and look at it from the front to see where I'm at. So some of this stuff is longer than it needs to be. Probably could stand to be thinned some more. I always, it's supposed to look kind of like a plucked chicken, and we're not quite there yet. But at the same time, I don't want to do any more. So I should thin this out a whole lot more, huh, Renee?
Repeat your question.
I should thin this out more? It's still way too heavy. It can be thinned out more. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to go all the way around the outside. I'm cutting back to, like this, I'm cutting back to where there's growth behind it, active growth, so that these things will come back. As long as there's buds out there. I like this thing sticking way up, and I can cut that. There. Pull that off. So it's like one more time around. Okay, that's better. I'm sure I could pick away at it for a lot longer, but I'm pretty happy with the way that's looking. But basically, this is what we've got going. So this is going to grow again, and I need to make sure I have covering that. This is my apex. I'm okay with the way the branches are structured. I'm happy to have this. I had grown this out not thinking I was going to use it like it was going to be an afterthought. But actually, I like this because up here, these two are almost bar branches. Could not take that off. I kept moving them up and down, trying to get the balance to work. But now that I have this here, I think I have a better balance for the directions of the tree, and the back branch works. Yay!
Okay, so it's been a long day of work, and this is what our subjects look like at the end of the day. We've thinned this one out, just letting it grow. This guy's been pruned back, cleaned out, wired, Shari added, going back on the bench to grow. Been fertilized just a couple weeks ago, so he's ready to just go back on the bench and grow. This one, our intermediate subject, pads have been set. You can see the difference now. Beautiful pads, starting to really look like a finished tree. It's just going to get better from here on out as these pads develop. The more finished tree, we decided we're going to wait just a little bit longer to work on that. It's just starting to push its strong growth. So just going to let it grow for another month before we actually get in there and start doing the heavy pruning and thinning and setting the pad structure. So that's it for now, guys, and we'll see you next month.